Hello. We're going to pick up where we left off here in John. We're going to be only in John for this section. We're going to be reading 11 through 36. There's a lot of information to dive into, so bear with me as I read with you, read along with me, and I share my notes. Sorry, I'm trying to keep my head in front of this light here behind me so it doesn't glare. So let's go ahead and jump into John chapter 7, where we were. We left off in 10 before. We're going to pick up here in 11, and because of the amount of notes and information here, I'm going to stop along the way and hopefully clarify some things. So read along with me here, verse 11. So Jesus, we know that, right, that he didn't go because his brothers challenged him, right, but he's now going up to the Feast of Tabernacles, okay? So then the Jews sought him at the feast and said, "Where is he?" And there was much complaining among the people concerning him. Some said, "He is good," and others said, "No, on the contrary, he deceives the people." However, no one spoke openly of him for fear of the Jews. So there's a couple of things happening. Let me kind of set the scene here, right? We're at his last year, right? This Feast of Tabernacles, which it starts in October and ends in December, okay? So there's also the Feast of Dedication that's happening, okay? So also known as Hanukkah, as a Jewish holiday for today, right? There's only two Gospels, which is John and Luke. I actually have them open, but we're only going to read from John. These are the only two Gospels that speak of these two particular feasts. Okay, so we have large groups of people now here that are starting to accept the Pharisees, the Pharisaical view of Jesus. Remember, saying that he works by the work of the devil, right? The unpardonable sin when he casts out evil spirits, right? They're saying that he does that as the work of the devil. So you have here, right, some said he's good and say, no, on the contrary, he deceives the people, right? So we have large multitudes of people now that are falling for this Pharisaical view of him. So let's see. This is, 11 through 13 here, okay? This is the second temple period, okay? You have the first temple, and then we have the second temple period. So this puts us at a time in around 515 BC up to 70 AD, which was the destruction of the temple. So that's the time period that we have here. And I'll put some of these things down in the notes below for you to see as well. And so there's two ceremonies during the Feast of Tabernacles, okay? And so one of these is the outpouring of water. The priests would descend down a steep hill from the temple, okay, and they would gather buckets of water, and so pitchers of water, okay, and they would do this every day for 7 days, returning back to the temple through what's called the water gate, okay, and they would be ascending, so the steps going up, ascending 15 steps. That would be from the outer court to the inner court, this 15 steps here. And so this is just semantics, really, but it's good information about what's happening, okay? And so they would be singing, and this is known as the songs of ascent. You may have heard this. This is Psalms 120 through 134. That's 15 psalms. They would sing one per step. Again, I'll have that in the notes for you, but these are called the Songs of Ascent. You've probably heard that name before, and if you haven't, there you go. This is why it's named that, as they ascend back up to the temple and the outpouring of water. And this inner court tradition, these outpouring of the water, they put it at the base of the altar. This typically represents the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, right? And so this will be like in the last days, what's happening. Let me flip my notes here. And so this is the Pharisaical interpretation of this ceremony that's happening here. Another important ceremony that's happening is called the kindling of the lampstand. And so these are things that you can use to look up later, but some information. One last thing before we continue to study, before we continue to move on here. Verse 13, it said, "No one spoke openly of him for fear of the Jews." So John uses the term Jews 71 times in his gospel, and we need to pay attention and keep in context what he means by the word Jews, right? So we can have the literal Jews, right? The descendants of Abraham. Okay, we could have the Judeans, which is a very distinct difference from the Galileans, right? And then we have the Jewish leadership of Israel. So when reading in context, we need to be careful about who we're imagining or picturing and understanding the context of who the Jews are that he is speaking of. Okay, and so let's see. Now, where is he? Okay, so they are looking for him. When it says the Jews sought him, right, and they're looking for him, this is because they are looking for him to fulfill this Feast of Tabernacles, which again is the Zechariah 14, 16 through 21. You can toggle back over there to read that, right? And so they're not wrong, again, that he's going to fulfill this feast, is that they're wrong about the timing. Even the Pharisees, right, and even his disciples, they're still confused about there being one Christ, but two comings. Okay, and so that's where they're saying that they seek him to fulfill this, right? And then it says here too that, however, no one spoke openly of him for fear of the Jews, right? That's why we started talking about that Jew's name. So in this case, it's the Jewish leadership, right? They don't want to speak openly because of the fear of the leadership. Remember that the Pharisees, the Jewish leadership, rejected Christ. So there is this toss-up of some believe he's good, some believe he's not, right? But they're not going to speak out about it because of the fear of the Jewish leadership. And so I think that is my notes for this moment. Let's continue reading here in verse 14. Now about the middle of the feast, Jesus went up to the temple and taught. And the Jews marveled, saying, how does this man know letters, having never studied? So the middle of the feast puts us at about the fourth day. Okay, and they're going to challenge him here. That's what they're talking about, his authority, right? How does he know, being that he's never studied? So let's continue reading a little farther. In verse 16, Jesus answered them and said, my doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone wills to do his will, he shall know concerning the doctrine, whether it is from God, or whether I speak on my own authority. He who speaks from himself seeks his own glory, but he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. Did not Moses give you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why do you seek to kill me? Okay, and so he's saying that he's the one sent, seeks the glory of the sender, right? He is the one sent, right? And so they're challenging his authority because Jesus was not, he's teaching, okay, and he was not ordained in a rabbinical school. And so they're challenging, where does his authority come from? And of course, he tells them that he doesn't have, his doctrine is not from man's authority, right? But it is of God who sent him, who sent me, right? And so let's continue on here. The people answered and said, you have a demon. Who is seeking to kill you? Okay, so, because he says, why do you seek to kill me? So, again, now all the people, it says the people, are answering him. So we have this toss-up of, is he good, is he bad? Some believe the popular belief of the Pharisees, that he serves the devil. Okay, now we have the large multitudes that are believing. The people answered and said, you have a demon, right? And so they're accusing him, again, of serving the devil, right? The unpardonable sin. Okay, and so let's carry on. Verse 21. Jesus answered and said to them, I did one work, and you all marvel. Moses therefore gave you circumcision, not that it's from Moses, but from the fathers. And you could circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath, so that the law of Moses should not be broken, are you angry with me because I made a man completely well on the Sabbath? Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. Okay, so they're accusing him of violating the Sabbath, right? Doing this healing here, and so he is comparing the rabbi's law of circumcision supersedes the law of the Sabbath, right? And so he's challenging them on this. He's comparing, like, why is it okay to supersede the law when you're following the law of Moses to do the circumcision, but yet it's not to heal a man, right? He's asking them to use righteous judgment here. And so let's continue on verse 25. Now some of them from Jerusalem said, "Is this not he whom they seek to kill? But look, he speaks boldly, and they say nothing to him. Do the rulers know indeed that this is truly the Christ? However, we know where this man is from, but when the Christ comes, no one knows where he is from." Okay, and so they let's continue in verse 28 before we step in again. Then Jesus cried out as he taught in the temple, saying, "You both know me, and you know where I am from, and I have not come of myself, but if he who sent me, is true, whom you do not know, but I know him, for I am from him, and he sent me." Okay? Therefore they sought to take him, but no one laid a hand on him, because his hour had not yet come. Let's stop there for a second. So he's speaking in a parable here, right? And so they know where he came from physically, right? Where he was born. What they don't know is where he came from divinely, right? And he's not speaking clearly when he's explaining that to him. So we still have the multitudes of people here that are divided on believing him or rejecting him. And so let's keep reading, and then we'll carry on here. So laid a hand on his hour had not yet come. And many of the people believed him and said, "When the Christ comes, he will do more signs than these which this man has done." Okay, the Pharisees heard the crowd murmuring. That would be those who were believing, right? So we have these large groups of people who don't, and large groups of people who do. Okay, now we have this murmuring. These things concerning him, and the Pharisees and the chief of priests sent officers to take him. Then Jesus said to them, "I shall be with you a little while longer, and then I go to him who sent me. You will seek me and not find me, and where I am, you cannot come." That's the parable we're speaking of here. Okay. Then the Jews said amongst themselves, "Where does he intend to go that we shall not find him? Does he intend to go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? What is this thing that he said, 'You will seek me and not find me, and where I am, you cannot come'?" Right? So again, this is that parable that he's speaking of. He could have just plainly stated, but he's not going to because of their rejection, right? Their unpardonable sin. He only speaks in parables, right? They don't know where he divinely is from. Okay, so because of the murmuring, those that have believed, okay, they sought a high priest to arrest Jesus. This would be the Pharisees, right? So you have the people that are no longer going with what the Pharisees believe, so now they are seeking to arrest him. This dispersion here where it says, does he intend to go to this dispersion of the Greeks? Okay, this is just a technical terms for the Jews living outside of the land. Okay, the dispersion of the Greeks. And so, and then teach the Greeks, he would be speaking of like the Gentiles. Okay. And so, but of course, he's not going to just state these things plainly. But I know that is a lot of notes. I will put a handful of those things in the notes down below. I hope you followed along, though, and you got some background on the feast and what was happening, what they were doing. We have the general timeline of which this was happening. And so that was quite a bit of information that we gathered there from John chapter 7. So I will see you again shortly.